The Carolina Panthers had probably the worst defense in football last season. So what did they do to kick off free agency? They keep pounding the defense, baby. They've pounced all over the defensive talent, and I absolutely love it. Before I give you my thoughts on the Panthers' defensive upgrades from the defensive line through the secondary, spike the like button. Let me know in the comments, Carolina Panther fans, what you think about these upgrades. A lot of them are underrated, under the radar names, but all of them will play a crucial role for the Panthers in 2025 and potentially beyond. Hopefully uplifting the Panthers defense to a respectable unit in 2025. So let me know in the comments, spike the like button, and don't be a jabroni. Subscribe for more NFL free agency news. The Panthers have made some really promising additions. The first of which is Tershawn Wharton of the Kansas City Chiefs. A 3-year deal worth up to $54 million for Wharton, a player that slipped under the radar, even on the Chiefs. Slipping under the radar is impressive when you're on the Chiefs, okay? They're on television all the time. Everybody talks about them, right? Wharton was one of those players that went way under the radar for the AFC champs and the 2-time back-to-back Super Bowl champs previous to that. He's played his entire career in Kansas City, but this recent season, he played a much bigger role. 6.5 sacks this past season, 29 tackles, and 11 quarterback hits, which was up from last year's 2 sacks, 21 tackles, and 5 hits. He also finally earned a starting role on this Chiefs defensive front, playing 10 starts, okay, and becoming the guy beside Chris Jones for basically more than half of the last half of the season, okay? So the Chiefs typically have rotated that second defensive tackle with Wharton, Pennell, Nandi, these different body types. Wharton is intriguing for the Panthers because they play a lot differently from a defensive front perspective than a Steve Spagnuolo. What you'll see out of Spagnuolo most of the time is a traditional 4-3 set when they go to a base personnel look, when they're playing more run-heavy teams like you may have saw in the Super Bowl. And you'll see a 4-man front in a nickel formation typically out of the Chiefs. They like to send a lot of simulated pressures. They like to toy with quarterbacks that way. But Wharton was basically the man beside Chris Jones on a lot of those 4-man lines, especially on passing snaps and passing downs. When it came to the Carolina Panthers and the signing for the Panthers, it's interesting because I think it's a little bit more of a projection for how he'll play for the Panthers. Because Carolina is a little bit different in terms of, yes, you'll see those 4-man nickel fronts, but you might also see him playing maybe at 5 tech in a 3-4 style of defense, or you might see him in different alignments that might actually allow him to slip through an offensive line even more effectively because he is smaller. He's 6'1", 280. So he plays with quickness, he plays with leverage, and he plays with great hands and the ability to pop off the ball. He's going to win with quickness rather than power and strength because he's not the biggest guy in the world. But when you have a guy like Derrick Brown beside you, who's overwhelmingly powerful, that can take on double teams, Wharton is one of those guys that could effectively, basically play off of him and be able to pick his matchups and toy with interior guards and centers with his quickness. So the Jekyll and Hyde nature of Carolina's interior duo could be pretty promising because Wharton would be the guy you would project to see the most snaps beside Derrick Brown because of the contract they gave him. And because he was one of those really under-the-radar coveted players this free agency, signing a 3-year, $54 million deal. I don't think a lot of people actually understand how much he's respected across the NFL. Because, like I said, playing in a challenging Spagnuolo defense, being a little undersized, but still being able to perform at that level, it speaks to his talent, it speaks to his ability, and he's worked within this rotation for a very long time. I mean, he's finally broken out, but he is 26 years old. He's going to be 27 in June. He's right in his prime. It's a perfect signing for the Panthers, right? And they've really looked to upgrade their interior defensive line. They also signed Bobby Brown, to this interior defensive line. Bobby Brown, the former Ram, okay? He got a 3-year, $21 million deal that could go to 27, including incentives. Bobby Brown is a nose tackle, okay? He's a big boy. Bobby Brown is the opposite of Tershawn Wharton. Wharton is 6'1", 280. Doesn't even look like the same specimen. Wharton is more so of an edge rusher type, really, when you look at him from a body type perspective, right? That's actually what they tried, like in Kansas City. They tried to make him sort of that type of player early in his career. He's listed as a defensive end in the years 2020 and 2021 on Pro Football Reference. They attempted to make him an edge rusher because of his size. But actually his best fit was on the interior, and it's finding that unique usage for him that makes him really a good player. Now, when it comes to Bobby Brown, he is the opposite. He's 6'4", 332. This is the guy you want playing over the center. This is a guy you want beating people up in the running game and basically making it so that you're not a soft defense anymore. You can't just be ran on right up the middle, down after down after down. And Bobby Brown is crucial in that aspect for the Rams the last couple of years, where he's been starting the last 2 seasons for the Rams at nose tackle, 13 games in 2023 and 16 games in 2024, 31 tackles in 2023, 44 tackles in 2024. He was only a rotation, a very small percentage of snaps in his first 2 seasons in the NFL. But basically, he is a space eater, a run defender. It doesn't get too complicated in projecting his role. He, though, did grade very well at 47th overall, according to PFF last year. That's a pretty good player. And the year before that, 27th with a 72 PFF grade. So he's somebody that has been really good in terms of run defense. Last year, the 21st best run defender at his position. So the Panthers were terrible against the run last year. Bobby Brown will help them in that regard. Tershawn Wharton helps them in terms of the pass rush. Right, 6.5 sacks last year. He's going to be a guy that can play in sub packages. You can do some funky things with him, lining up at end, maybe running some interesting stunts with him. Having him play beside Brown in those 3rd down situations, those sub package situations. Last year, he was graded as the 49th best interior player in football with a 71.9 pass rushing grade, which was his strength, compared to his run defense grade that was only 48.3. For Kansas City, he played as the rotation player alongside Derek Nandi and Mike Pennell. When the Chiefs needed more of a run defense, they would go to Mike Pennell. They would go to Derek Nandi for their size. For Wharton, he was a little undersized, which caused a weak 48 run defense grade. But as a pass rusher, 71.9. On top of that, if you do play him more at 5 tech, he's less exposed. If that's where they're going to play him in a 3-4 defense, in a base look, because a lot of teams don't play 3-4 defenses anymore on very few snaps. But if that's the role you want to play with him on a base down or a snap that you think a run is coming, I feel like he would fit that role. So he was 21st in pass rushing grade, 87th in run defense grade. Okay, so clearly you see the complementary aspect here, right? You've got one guy that's really good as a pass rusher, one guy that's really good as a run defender, and you can see how those guys will rotate. And you also look at Carolina, and one of the thoughts I had when both of these guys signed is like, you already have so many interior defensive linemen that you've signed to contracts. Like Shai Tuttle was signed, A'Shawn Robinson was signed, right? So like Derek Brown's already there. How many of these guys are you going to have? So it's about building that rotation of strengths and weaknesses and being able to play and optimize your defensive line based on down situation and all that sort of stuff, right? So that's what they're looking for in Carolina with these signings. Tershawn Wharton, being a player that I think has a lot of immense upside. Diving into some of his, I want to just dive into some of his like pressures and things like that, just for your guys' sake here. So looking at his numbers on PFF, he had 33 pressures last year, which is a pretty good number. 33 pressures last season on only the regular season. I'll take a look at the playoffs as well. 33 pressures was 31st in the NFL. He did have above a 10% win percentage at that position. In his true pressure sets, he had an 8.3 PRP, pass rushing productivity grade, and a 15% win percentage with 27. So his pass rushing productivity actually goes up 4 points based on every down and based on pure pass rush situation. So he's a much better player in pure pass rush situations based on the evidence from PFF. Okay, that's rather interesting in my opinion. Looking at some of the run defense stats, I'm going to look in particular at Bobby Brown here, just for the sake of it. Bobby Brown was 20th in a run defense grade. In terms of run play tackles, he had 26, which was 25th in the NFL, tied with Harrison Phillips, Mozzie Smith, and Vita Vea. And in terms of stops, he had 16 stops, which is like 30 in the 30s. Okay, so Bobby Brown, good run defender. Tershawn Wharton, good pass rusher. Now, they had two other signings, which are interesting. Now, sticking on the defensive front for the sake of the video, Patrick Jones out of Minnesota, the Vikings, 6'4", 264. He is one of the younger guys as well, 26, I believe, turning 27 before September 29th. So later September. But he had a breakout season this year too. And he was one of the guys, watching him in Minnesota, he would always stand out. I think he's got a lot of versatility to his game. I feel like he's a guy that you could play off the line, but also on the line of scrimmage. He's a bigger guy, 6'4", 7 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, and 12 quarterback hits last year. He was not a starter. He was a rotation player because they have Andrew Van Ginkel, awesome player, and Jonathan Grenard, awesome player. Patrick Jones was like that third edge rusher for them that I feel like they would use a lot in stunts, simulated pressures, third down packages, occasionally rotating in on early downs. But he's a guy that will be interesting to see how Carolina uses. I could see him being used a little bit like Frankie Louvu in terms of the ability to kind of play around with his skill set, because that's kind of how Brian Flores used him, and he always stood out in a playmaking way for the Vikings last year. He just, like, every time I'd watch them, it felt like he was around. Like, the dreads are flowing. He was running around, popping people or making a play. So he's definitely a guy that makes an impact. And I couldn't really figure, I remember watching him and being like, oh, this is just a rotation player, because he hadn't really been much before last year. Like, he had played, but not started, and he had 5 sacks in 2 seasons before that. So he was more of like a rotation guy, not really heard of before last year. So I remember just watching him play, and I'm like, what position is he? Like defensive end? Is he linebacker? He's kind of like one of those players, you know what I'm saying? So he graded as the 94th best edge rusher in football last year, according to PFF. His best grade is in 2022, 56, but his run defense grade was 69.4, which was 31st. So PFF sees him as a better run defender than a pass rusher, despite his sack total from last year, which is interesting. He only played 459 snaps, but he's a player that I feel like could see more snaps, definitely in Carolina. I think he could be a starting caliber player that can set the edge for them. And he has really good size. So he's a exceptionally sized edge rusher for like a guy that's going to be standing up a lot, right? He's 6'4", 264. That's a big boy. Typically, those guys are not standing up on the edge, like Clowney and Wonham. So Wonham, also a former Viking. I could see Pat Jones taking some relief from Clowney potentially if he's sticking around in the next year, or even Wonham as well on those rundown sets. Let's check out deeper into his numbers for the edge position. Let's see. So let's look. Minnesota, Pat Jones had 13.8% stop percentage, which was actually the best in the NFL. That's interesting. I did not know that. So out of players that had 20% of snaps on 405 total snaps, he had the highest percentage of run play stops. He had 15 total for the season, 17 total run play stops. And his average depth of tackle was 1.9, which is also pretty impressive as well. Now, in terms of pass rushing, right, like, based on his profile, he's more of a run defender just based on last year, according to PFF. But he still had that promise to put up those sacks, and I feel like that was mostly from the scheme. So Carolina's got to be smart. If they're going to use him as a pass rushing type, they've got to be smarts on the stunts and things like that. So Carolina, let's check his pass rushing stats. So Minnesota, Pat Jones, 5.2 PRP, which is not very good. 24 pressures, which is fine, but he only played on 347 snaps. His pure pass rush situation, PRP was back up at 8. A little bit better, but still average. So yeah, a guy that more of a power player, a guy that can set the edge, help them stop the run, but not going to be the best pass rusher. So there's still, I think Carolina's still going to be searching for like a big time pass rushing type. Wharton will help in that regard. Clowney should still be producing. Derek Brown, they need a guy that can get 10 sacks a year. They're still kind of missing that guy. But Jones and Brown especially really help their run defense significantly. Both those players are very good against the run. So that's good because Carolina was terrible against the run last year. And they actually found a way to get some blitzing pressure on teams last year. So maybe that's the type of team they want to be. They also re-signed their corner, Michael Jackson, who actually played really well for them last year on a per-play basis. He's a decent depth corner for them. So I like that re-signing. And they extended J.C. Horn, which was obviously a little bit expensive for my taste for him because of the injury history. But when he plays, he's an excellent player. Now let's finish this video off with the most common understood, like known player of the video, which is Tre'Von Moehrig, a 3-year deal, $51 million contract. This was the first signing of the day for Carolina. He started 64 games in 4 years for Vegas. He was actually one of the highest touted safeties in his draft class. I do recall him being like an early second round pick, if I'm not mistaken. And he was one of the most coveted safeties on the market due to his age, his experience. And last season, he had his best season of his career. 6'2", 202, good size. I wouldn't say he's the fastest, but he has a really well-rounded game. 104 tackles last season, which was the most of his career, up from 83 the year previous. 2 interceptions. He had 10 passes defense, which was the most of his career, up from 8 the year before, and a sack on his resume. Last year was the best season of his career, in my opinion. He allowed a passer rating of 92, the year previous 79, okay? 65% completion for what it's worth. Safeties are kind of sometimes hard to tell what the responsibility is. Some of those coverage stats can be a little bit misleading. But in terms of Moehrig, I think he's more of a strong safety type than a free safety type, in my opinion, although he's played both. I don't think like he's the rangiest guy in the world, but he does have... like he's really physical. Like I feel like he brings a physical aspect to the Carolina secondary. It'll be interesting to see who they play alongside him. So in his career, he's graded pretty well. 2023, 30th. As a rookie, 25th. He had a bad year in 2022 where he was graded 79th. Last year, he played 439 snaps in the box, 191 at slot, and 361 in free safety. So a bit of versatility, but mostly a box safety. And he did have a very good run defense grade of 87.5. So, yeah, more of a run defender, as I kind of thought. Really good tackler. He'll lay the wood. He'll bring the hammer, so to speak, in the secondary. So looking at their current safety group, Woods is a free agent and Fuller's a free agent. So I'm not exactly sure if they know who their free safety is going to be or if they want, 2 safeties that are going to be more in this Evero system. If they want to play more 2 safety high, I feel like Moehrig can also play well in that system as well because he's shown enough versatility to play an even amount of free safety and strong safety snaps. And we've seen him in both roles. So I feel like he could operate in a system that plays more of 2 safeties deep, or if you're going to play more cover 1, cover 3 style, which Carolina kind of did last year, then he'll be more the guy in the box floating around the line of scrimmage and coming down and laying the wood. So I like that signing quite a bit. He's a good age. He's not old at all. And I like all these signings for Carolina, how they're around 25, 26, 27 years old. That's very good. Moehrig's 25. He turns 26 in June. So all these guys are in their prime or just reaching their prime or just before their prime, which is also fantastic. So Moehrig to the Panthers. Those are the Panthers pouncing on defensive signings today on March 10th. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. Gronk, spike the like button, subscribe, and check out the BLV Discord. Link is at the pinned comment. Check it out, guys. The alarm is off. Gotta go.